Hi everyone, welcome to our event. This event is brought to you by DataTalks.Club, which is a community of people who love data. We have weekly events. Today is one of such events. If you want to find out more about the events we have, there is a link in the description. Go there, click on this, and you'll see all the events we have in our pipeline. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't. So if you do this, you will know about all our future events, awesome events like we have today. And last but not least, we have a very cool community where you can hang out with other data enthusiasts. So if you're not there, you're missing out. So during today's interview, you can ask any question you want, but unfortunately right now I cannot access Slido for some reasons. So this screenshot is kind of, so just put your questions in the live chat. I have them on my phone here, and I will be covering these questions during the interview. Okay, so that's it. Now I will open the questions we prepared. And if you're ready, we can start.
Okay.
You're ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So this week we'll talk about the role of a staff AI engineer. And we have a special guest today, Tatiana. Tatiana works as a staff AI engineer at LinkedIn. Before that, she worked in physics and in healthcare. It's actually not the first time Tatiana is a guest here in this podcast. Around 2 years, maybe slightly less, I don't remember. We already talked with her, and the topic there was changing careers from academia, from physics to machine learning. And now, after 2 years, we again have Tatiana, and we will speak about the staff role. So welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting.
So before we go into our main topic of being a staff engineer, let's start with your background. We already spoke about your background years ago, but maybe you can run us through again and then also tell us what also happened in the last 2 years.
So I started my career with PhD in physics, and I worked for a while developing lasers and optical systems. Then on maternity leave, I got quite interested in machine learning field, which was new back then. So I started to do pet projects and CogLink and doing some research, my own research, and publishing papers in machine learning. And after maternity leaves, I moved to healthcare when I was working on computer-aided diagnostic tool for labor monitoring. And at that point, we talked almost 2 years ago. After 1 year of work in a hospital, I started to go through interviews to different companies, big tech companies, different startups, remote works, and so on, and started to work as a tech lead at LinkedIn. So after some difficult choose LinkedIn, where I worked for the last 1 year and a half. And that's been like pretty much all the news for the last 2 years, but I learned a ton because it's a new industry and new environment.
Yeah, that was pretty concise.
I tried.
Yeah, you tried. So I'm just curious, it's probably 2 different worlds or even 3 different worlds, like academia, then working at a hospital, and then now working at a big tech company, right? So it's like all 3 are very different. So how was it for you? Like when you from a hospital, when you joined LinkedIn, a big tech company, how was it for you? Overwhelming, I guess?
It was transformational. It was overwhelming. In the first 3 months of onboarding, I was working about 80 hours, 70, 80 hours a week. Big kudos to my husband, who understood that I needed the time. So he was helping with kids a lot when I was just studying in evenings. Yes, it was like a big challenge, but also a big shift is in a mindset. So when you work in academia, and also hospital is quite close to academia, your timeline is a bit different. You plan projects for 1-2 years. You are not in a hurry. You are like relaxed. You don't have that many meetings. So you really learn in academia a bunch of skills of effective communication, of fast pace of making planning quarterly or delivering results faster. So what you do in academia for during a year, you need to accomplish during 3 months and things like that. And when you have a meetings in academia, people talk like they have all the time in the world. So for 1 hour, you can have a meeting without that much outcome. And in industry, you have 20 minutes meetings. You have to decide what you're going to do. Then the next 20 minutes meetings, 30 minutes meetings, and so on. So you learn a lot on collaboration, communication, prioritization, and so on. Yeah, but that was very useful.
Yeah, like 80 hours a week, that's insane. Like, why did you need to um why did you need to put so much effort there? Like, I guess at the beginning it was just too difficult, too overwhelming, so you needed to put extra effort into catching up with everything.
I think, yes, it's well, it's not that I always work 80 hours a week.
Hmm.
It's not
But at the
possible for
beginning
me.
you had, right?
But
You
in
had
the
to
beginning, I
work.
realized that I came and I realized that, okay, Scala, Spark. I never
Hmm.
thought of that. Kubernetes. So a lot of internal tools that I never used. And you also a tech lead, so you actually don't have that much onboarding and relaxed onboarding. You are a tech lead and you actually lead others. So you already need to deliver some design of the new system at scale, and that you never delivered at this scale, like for recommendation systems for 80 million users. It's not something that I was doing before, but I was a tech lead, so all decisions were on my side. So to make those decisions, I had to learn a lot how other companies do it, read a lot of blog posts, papers as well. At the same time, learning all those tools that I never used. Yes, and I guess I was just overwhelmed, so I tried to do my best to catch up. If I had to do it second time, I would say myself, take it easy. It's okay. They give you time. You're not supposed to deliver results in the first 2 months. It's okay. But I think I was so much worrying that I will not be effective enough that I worked extra mile. Now I know that I could have taken it easier and
Hmm.
take my time to learn.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I want to ask you more about the tools and like how you approach this learning. But before that, I think it would be interesting to know what tech leads do, what staff engineers do. You mentioned that you need to lead others, you need to design systems, you need to make decisions, right? So how, like, what does your day look like? What kind of things you need to do?
Yeah. Okay. So in short, I'll tell like that. I'm paid for my opinion.
Hmm.
That's in short. So now in details, as a staff engineer, there are different kind of staff engineers. Particularly our team is horizontal team. It means that we have a lot of internal stakeholders in different orgs. And that means a lot of interactions with different teams, with products, with data scientists, with other teams, with annotators, with legal team, and so on. So like almost half of my work are different meetings and interactions. And you are liaising on strategy, you are defining roadmap for a set of projects. You agree with other leaders and align on different cross-functional collaborations, different projects. You also own the delivery of the results and their impact. So a lot of work goes into that meetings on alignment and defining the roadmap and strategy and what you're going to do and defining the objective, both business and technical goals, basically. You collaborate with products a lot on that. On the technical side, you also mentor a lot of people, not only in your immediate team, but across different teams as well. You work with ML engineers, annotators, engineer linguists, data scientists, UI engineers, and you supervise them all to make sure that the project is delivered on time. You are part of promo committees and hiring committees when you review the work of the others. You do as AI technical stuff, you do a lot of machine learning design. Obviously, if you're staff in some other like infrastructure, you probably work on system design more. So a lot of work is dedicated to creating designs and also reviewing designs of the others. So when people do some designs, that has to be reviewed, and often staff is the person who is pulled in to get the opinion. You also do a lot of code reviews. So people who work with you write code and you review it for your team and also outside your team. You don't write much of the code. I still try to keep hands-on, so I dedicate myself 1 day a week to write code. That's my choice, basically. But most of the time, you don't really write the code. And there are some staffs who don't write any code, and there are some staff people who write more code. Depends on what kind of staff you are as well. And as for me, I write a lot of docs, obviously, and a lot of plans and roadmaps. And everything needs a doc. If you have a legal alignment, for example, you need to document it and things like that. And yeah, that's pretty much all the pillars. So designing systems, mentoring others, giving your opinion, improving craftsmanship of the team and outside your team, defining strategy, defining roadmap, and making sure that the bigger projects involving many teams go to production and they make an impact.
Quite a lot for one person, isn't it?
Well, you are more like leading that. So you don't do that all yourself, right? People who implement things work with you. So, and you collaborate with products as well, who define what business impact to expect and things like that. And you collaborate with legal team who is advising you what you can and cannot do and things like that. So, but yes, it's a lot of coordinations and meetings. You can, in a weekly basis, you can meet like, 5 to 10 different teams and with different people. So, again, this is cross-team collaboration type of stuff when you have a lot of cross-team collaborations. So that's my role. There are also different types of staff, people who, for example, there are people who have very great technical expertise and they know some particular narrow field or not necessarily narrow field very well, and they're pulled into troubleshooting. So if there is a critical problem and something does not work, they are pulled in to solve the problem, like firefighting. They're great at this. There are people who have great depths and widths of some field, for example, machine learning. They act as advisors to the leadership. So they're like personal advisor on the technical side. There is this kind of stuff. And so there are different, there are people who have very great expertise compared to the others. So they mentor and teach others this expertise and focus more on hands-on. So they create a lot of leverage by actually coding, but that's not very common. Not usually all the staff are doing a lot of coding. It depends on the role. So if you're a horizontal team and you have a lot of different interactions, you're not paid for coding, you're more paid for your opinion and making decisions and realizing all this and defining roadmap. Although you can, I'm still trying to be involved in coding myself, not only review, but most of the code, I don't write, I review it. Like 1 to 10, I'd say. To each one submission that I do, I review 10, something like that.
Okay. So just to summarize what you said, there are multiple kinds of staff engineers, staff level people, or profiles. Or I think I've heard the word archetypes.
Yes.
So what you do is collaboration and coordination work, right? Then there is like somebody who has great deep technical expertise. So they are pulled in when there is a problem in some specific area and they help solve it. And then there are people who have broad expertise. So they act as advisors, right? Did I miss anything?
Both broad and deep in some area. Yes, they can be.
Or it's one person, right? So deep in one and broad in others.
No, there are people who manage to have both. So after a while, if you're 20 years in the field.
I guess, yeah, it's like this T-shaped profile, right?
Yes. So yeah, there is a book, I think it's called Staff Engineer Path, which defines those archetypes quite well. So, and I quite agree with that definitions. I read that book and yes, it's so, yeah.
Okay, so you're paid for your opinion. You spend 50% time in meetings. and then you work on strategy, define roadmaps, then you also mentor people, take part in design decisions. And you mentioned that at the beginning you needed to work like 70, 80 hours because I guess for you it was many of these things were difficult, right? So you weren't certain that your design decisions are good, so that you wanted to improve your skills. Did I understand it correctly?
Yes, I wanted to, like, some of that was very well transferred from academia. For example, all this communication, collaboration, roadmap, strategy, it's exactly how you define your research proposal. You write a plan for 2 years, you define goals, you liaise with different teams and so on. Mentoring, a big part of academic work. So nothing changed there. But I did not work in NLP before, and I did not work exactly with this type of recommendation systems at that scale. So that was a big part of learning. So I took a couple of courses, both on NLP and recommendation systems, but I also read a lot in blog posts and in papers that other companies publish. And also a big part of learning was internal tools. You can't learn them outside. Pretty much you can, but they're not that common outside. So you learn a lot those internal tools, and plus I did not work with Scala Spark before, and with Kubernetes I did not work before. There were also some gaps because I never worked as a software engineer. So I had probably a little bit more gaps in the technical part, but a little bit fewer in strategy and communication, thanks to academia.
How did you approach learning? How did you know what next to learn? Did you create a plan and follow this plan? Did you ask your colleagues for their advice, or how did you do this?
So yeah, my onboarding was rather hectic. I was just learning whatever I could without, proper understanding what to prioritize. So in the beginning, you're overwhelmed simply because you don't know what you need to prioritize and how. So if I had to do it second time, I would understand better, and that wouldn't require that much time. So yeah, basically taking one course after the other and without clear understanding what is more important at this very moment. I only got this understanding in about 2-3 months.
Mm-hmm. So that does sound very overwhelming, right? Trying to, learn everything at the same time, or at least one after another. How would you suggest, let's say, if you could give a piece of advice to yourself in the past, what would it be? Like, how would you suggest yourself in the past to approach this?
Yes, that's a good question. So onboarding is always a challenge, and onboarding in a big companies definitely is a challenge. So I would find more mentors from the start and just to ask to help with this technical plan. In fact, I had a mentor, but immediately he went to parental leave. And that's why I did not have a mentor as such on onboarding. Usually in onboarding process, you have a mentor who helps you and who guides you. And after that, we spent quite a time developing our onboarding for the next engineers, so they will not be overwhelmed. Hopefully that worked better. And so that's number one, find mentors immediately and ask. Also communicate with your manager all the time about priorities and expectations. And don't feel urged to deliver something in production in the first 2 months. It's okay. You have your time to onboard. In a big tech company, of course, if you're in a startup, you need to deliver by the end of the week.
No pressure, right?
Just kidding, but yes, it depends on the size of the company. It's onboarding time. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe startups don't really need this kind of profiles. Like they don't need somebody who is coordinating, because if it's just, I don't know, 1 or 2 teams, then people can just talk to each other without this special role, probably. Okay. And I know that you joined LinkedIn as a staff engineer after working in healthcare. And you managed to skip like a few roles before staff. So I know the usual career progression is you join a company as a junior, then I don't know, there are juniors, there are middle level professionals, then there are seniors, and then only after that there are staff engineers. And you, from what I understood, didn't have experience in industry, yet you didn't join LinkedIn as a middle level engineer or senior engineer. You joined it immediately as a staff engineer. And I'm wondering, how did this happen? How did you manage to kind of jump over these roles before and join and land a pretty high level position?
Yeah, I got this question a lot. So there is a myth, I think, that whenever you start your career, you have to start with a junior level. Mm-hmm. This is not correct. So it's not that I did not had my career before. I actually had PhD in physics, and then I worked in science for, I don't know, 6 years or so, leading my own projects like a research fellow. So when you're a principal investigator in science, what you do is the following. You come up with an idea of a project that nobody on earth ever done before. You need to find partners to make this happen. So you need to find a host institute who has enough equipment, partner institutes, industrial partners, like ideally 5 different organizations across the globe. You need to write a proposal when you put your plan, implementation plan, you sell motivation, why you need to do that. You do budgeting, you do your strategy, your OKRs, your everything. And if you are in the top 9% of those who submitted proposals, you get money. If you don't, you're jobless. That's how it works in science. And that's what I was doing for yes, it's much more complicated compared to like situation in industry in this regard. And I got 3 successful grants in a row, which is quite good. To get 3 successes, you obviously need to have 3 or more failures as well. So not all of my proposals were successful, but it teaches you a ton how you find collaborators, how you align with them, how you agree, how you write a plan, how you make a strategy, and so on. And then you lead those projects. So you hire students, PhD students, you mentor them, and you go through problems because it's highly risky projects in science. Nobody done it. You don't know if you can do it or not. Sometimes it leads to invention disclosures and great papers. Sometimes, oops, it's not going to work. It's also normal. It's very high risky projects. And so all that you can transfer. So a lot of those skills are actually transferable in terms of ownership, leadership, mentorship, strategy, road mapping, and all that stuff. There are some things that you don't do, like, for instance, you don't program in Scala, but you program in Fortran or MATLAB. So it's not exactly that, but not that much different. So it's technical skills that you need to fill the gaps. But for technical skills, I'd say 6 months, 12 months, you work yourself, you learn, you get it. It's much harder to learn soft skills, in my opinion, and to up-level your communication and collaboration. It's a way harder than learning Python, for example, in my opinion. And when you move to industry, it's important to put the right angle on all your previous experience and sell it in the right way. So in the beginning, I was making mistakes talking about lasers too much. So at the end, I stopped talking about lasers at all. I was talking what I was doing in terms of collaboration, alignment, delivery, and so on. And you could see straight away how it aligns well with the staff role. What also helps, if you look at the tech lead role, staff role in an organization in terms of their descriptions and expectations. And then you see how your previous experience aligns with what is in that docs. The docs are quite possible to find. So I'm not the only, although it's not like typical to have a career change, I'm not the only one like that. I know a bunch of people who were in academia or hospital, like my mentor in hospital who was leading me during my internship. He moved to Qualcomm straight as a staff engineer. Now he is a principal. So, he's a director now. And then my own manager at LinkedIn, she also started, she moved from academia to LinkedIn straight to the staff position. So it happens. It's just not that common because not many people change the area. And if you're a really great scientist, you actually can start as a distinguished, but you has to be fairly, if you're this level of expertise, like highly recognized scientist in academia, you can move to the highest level. That also happens.
Like Jan LeCun, right?
Not
And
very
Facebook.
common. Yeah, it happens. And the other option is some people, they do PhD, for instance, and they do startup. And then if the startup is acquired by a big company, they can start at the high level. For example, I know an example when Lyft acquired a startup, and that startup CEO started to be director. So he joined industry at the director level. So yeah, it's not that you have to start with middle or junior every time. You already had some career and you had the experience. It's just to which role you can fit most of your transferable skills.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the main takeaway for me is like that it's a myth that you have to start from a junior and you need to sell it to sell yourself in the right way. And I have two follow-up questions here. So maybe first, okay, yes, you need to sell yourself, but how do you convince them to actually, I don't know, trust you? How do you convince them that these skills that you have are transferable from academia to the industry? Because at the beginning, you also said that it's very different environments. And so how do you convince your employer that the skills you got in that environment are transferable to this new environment? Because they are pretty different.
Yeah, true. However, it also depends on the angle. So in the beginning, I wasn't successful quite with that. So in fact, first interviews, I was failing. But then after some practice, I learned which angle to choose, how to present my projects. One of the ways is to focus on your research projects that you've done in partnership with industry. And I had some of those. If this was partnership with industry, and you can say that, okay, we deliver an optical system for Alcon, who produces lenses, to identify defects on those lenses in a non-contact method and so on. So that's pretty much industrial things. It's very applied. So focus more on applied projects, for example. And if you had any collaborations with big companies, it also helps. Things like that. Obviously, they had to take risk as well, but you have to be just better than all other candidates. So for example, if your experience was different, it's probably not that preferable than compared to if you just move to other big tech company at the same role. However, you're always assessed compared to other candidates. And if you pass all interviews better than other candidates, it's okay. They may consider you even if you change as a role. So you have to prepare better for interviews and be better than others.
Yeah, so we want to spend quite some time talking about interviews, but before that, I'm really curious, how did you understand for yourself that the staff role is really for you? Like, because you didn't have this prior experience in industry. So somebody probably told you that you don't have to start from a junior position, right? So then you learned about this staff role, you learn it exists, and you learn that it's something that might fit your background, your experience, and you started preparing for this. So how did this happen?
No, it wasn't like that. I was just applying for any positions. I did not contact them. They contacted me first. So the same was with Meta. I did not contact them. They wrote me first. In fact, when I was working in hospital, I did not consider even big tech companies. I knew it's very hard to get to, and you need to prepare for interviews, and you need to solve those lead code problems. So I wasn't applying, but they were reaching out to me. The first was Meta, who wrote that your resume is fantastic for our role. I got a bit surprised, but I decided, why not to try the interviews? At the end of the day, I have nothing to lose. And that's when I talked to the recruiter. He decided that it's like a senior staff role after we discussed my experience. I was like, okay. And I went to interviews and I failed coding. Cool. But the rest was brilliant. Like I got overwhelming great feedback on system design, machine learning design, cultural fit, everything, just coding, obviously, because I didn't prepare. And then I realized, okay, it's not that hard to actually pass interviews to the big tech companies. All I need is just to start lead coding, and that's it. Like,
You say it as if it's so easy.
Yeah, well, then I was also interviewing with startups, and they were considering me for the lead role. And in fact, I had some offer for the lead role in one of the startups, leading the direction. So they kind of justified me this way after we discussed my experience. And that a bit put my level up from what I initially thought, because this was validation from outside. And so, as I said, I failed coding in Meta, but they did not send me away because I was quite good in designs. So they decided to give me a second chance and wait. So they agreed to give me a chance to prepare for coding interviews and gave me 6 weeks. So I started learning lead code full time. And at this time, when I was almost ready, LinkedIn came in and just wrote, hey, we have this staff position, would you mind to apply? And I decided, why not to go to interviews? I have nothing to lose. And I passed. So because the lead code was ready. So it was them who decided to contact me. And why they decided to contact me? Because somebody referred me. And why somebody referred me? Because I helped that somebody a few years before that. So help people, karma comes back. And when they offered me a staff role, it was not my actually, I wouldn't even apply for that maybe, but they approached me first. But then I found that indeed I'm quite a good fit for this particular type of staff with a lot of cross-team, cross-functional collaboration. For this particular type, I am a good fit. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think 2 years ago we discussed this at length, like how exactly you can help. Like I think we talked about like different myths and how you can. We talked about like forming teams, right? So how you approach career changes, and helping others was one of the things there. So then I guess you were doing this for quite some time, and then karma thanked you, right? And what I liked what you said right now, multiple times, that you have nothing to lose. Like every time an opportunity comes, you say, well, okay, whatever. Like, what can possibly go wrong there, right? Like they decline me, and that's not the end of the world, right?
Yeah, if they deny you, you're exactly at the stage where you're now. So you're not losing anything. I don't know. Some people are afraid of failures, but in fact, those are not failures. Failures is when you lose a lot. Like you cannot do failure in mountaineering. That is a bit of a problem. But for
But still,
trying interview, it's not a failure even.
rejections suck, right? Like it's kind of bad for your self-esteem, for self-worth. Like, okay, like they say I'm not worth this staff engineer position, then I'm not worthy at all, no?
No, not for me. I just don't feel like I look at it like as adventure. Let's try it. And if I failed, okay, I learned this. I failed a lot before I passed, by the way. In the beginning, I was failing every interview. I failed to lift, I failed Meta at the end because I did not pass that coding again. And I failed lots of startups and so on, but I don't feel that it does not affect my self-esteem because I consider it as learning. So I need to learn interview process. Interview process has nothing to do with my abilities, expertise, and so on. So maybe because I don't consider evaluation at interview really as evaluation of you. It's more like an evaluation of your interview skills in a way.
How
It
did you
does not
arrive
help.
at this? How did you arrive at this conclusion that, I mean, I totally agree with you, but it probably took some time for you to realize that it's not about you. You just need to know the process.
Yeah. Well, trying and failing, that's how I arrived.
I see.
Yeah, I was trying in the beginning. I learned that, okay, you need to change this, you need to work on this, and next time it goes better, and next time it goes better. I did a lot of mock interviews. I remember you were helping me, thank you, with mock interview as well. So I asked many people, and I learned a lot about that as well. And when I started to realize which problems I need to solve, how to present myself, and so on. And I started to be better at this. And I clearly understood it's more about preparing for interviews and learning how to
Yeah.
explain your thoughts well.
Then I think it's also one of the things we talked about last time, like, failure is not necessarily bad, right? It's an opportunity to learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then, so you said that during the interview with Meta, you did quite well at system design, ML design, other things. You didn't do well in coding, in lead code kind of questions. So how did you actually, without working in the industry, how did you actually manage to prepare yourself and pass these interviews?
Yeah, so for the big tech companies, let's separate startups from big tech companies.
Mhm.
They have different flows. And for the startups, it's hard actually to prepare because they can ask you whatever they want and in any manner. For the big tech companies, the process is more or less standardized and goes through certain steps. And you can familiarize yourself and start preparing. So one of the important aspects of big tech companies, they ask you coding interviews with type of questions that you can find on LeetCode. And so far, I didn't see many people who are able to solve them without preparation. There are guys who can come and solve it, but they were participating in competitive programming and they solved about 1,000 of them in school. So that doesn't count. If you never solve them and you never solve like 1,000 of that in school, big chances are you will not pass that interview. So that interview is more about preparation than about your coding skills, which is a bit annoying for most of the programmers in the world. But this is a scalable solution, and that's how you can assess different candidates fairly. So that was the biggest challenge for me, although I know that for some people, machine learning design is the biggest challenge. And some people are not very good in behavioral interviews. So everybody is different. So for me, the biggest challenge, as I realized, was this lead code type of interviews. I got lead code premium. That was a good idea. In LeetCode Premium, you see not only popular questions, but you also can see solutions, and they also provide you cards with theory. So I will start in studying recursion, how to form it, and then we'll go through some common tasks with solutions. And after you've done 10 of those, you can solve 11, hopefully yourself. And for every topic, it was like that. All the topics were new for me. I didn't know about even recursion when I started because I don't have computer science degree. I did not do that algorithms in university. So that was, maybe that's why it was the biggest challenge for me. So in total, I'd say 2 months is enough. As for me, I was doing it at that time, the work in hospital stopped because that's exactly what happens when you don't raise funding for the next proposals that I described. So sometimes you fail and then you're jobless. So that's exactly what happened in the hospital. We did not raise money for the next stage. And everybody who was not a doctor, who was a contractor, got jobless. It means that I had plenty of time for coding. So I was coding 9 to 5 every day. And in 5-6 weeks, I got like 300 problems in LeetCode. So if you solve about 350 problems, mostly focusing on mediums, not easy, and do all the theory, I'd say to some big tech companies, it will be enough. Maybe not for Google, but for many, it will be enough. So that's how I prepared LeetCode.
That's
how I prepared...
admirable perseverance, like really 6 weeks
in a row.
Yes, 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, 350 problems on LeetCode. That's really an accomplishment. That's
300 something.
How did you not give up?
I like that at the end. So in the beginning, I hated it, but after some time, it's actually cool. I like it. I like physics, math, and those type of algorithms, those challenges. I found it pleasant after some time. Mm-hmm. So I am a geek. Yeah, I can like such things.
I guess like when you solve a problem yourself without looking at hints, you kind of get a
dopamine. Happy.
Okay. Yes. Exactly.
It's like gaming, but it's different. Yeah, but it's like a bit like gaming, right? When you some people like gaming, so when they're successful, they get these hormones. same for me when I solve lead code myself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, how about like with lead code is just grinding, right? So you have to do this a lot, right? So you have to solve a lot of problems, especially if you don't have a computer science background, like in your case. How about other rounds like system design, ML design, behavioral? I think for behavioral, probably, like you said, you have these soft skills that you had from academia, and then probably it's just about thinking about situations you had in academia, and then, describing the situations. How about these two others, like system design, ML design, which you don't do in academia, I guess?
So surprisingly easy for me was ML design. And I realized that in academia, I was designing optical systems and lasers, and they have much in common with machine learning designs. You also start with scratch with the first principles. You understand what you want to accomplish, which data you need to collect, how much data, how you want to annotate it, and so on. And you can see the different options and their trade-offs. And so basically ML design in the way of thinking, it's quite similar to designs in physics in a way. Yeah, it's completely different fields and you need to know different techniques and stuff, but your way of thinking of decomposition, the problem and planning and about data and your intuitions, physics helps a lot here. To be honest, that was my discovery. But to do that properly, I've done several mock interviews with people I know on ML design. Mock interviews helped me the most. I also found some blog posts about ML design and a couple of YouTube videos. There is also Grokken ML design course, but I did not like that one, to be honest. And the best was a blog post by Patrick Halina, who wrote basically how to answer ML design on a staff level. And he's a staff in Pinterest. So, and I followed his guide, more or less, his plan. But also what was useful is for each particular company, I would go on their blog post and I would read about their ML designs. For example, I go to Lyft, I then open blog post of Lyft and I read about their ML designs. And then in interviews, when they ask me, I say, yeah, I've read in your blog post, you do it the following way. That's already a plus because you prepared and you know what stack they're using and you know what kind of designs they work on. So if you go to YouTube, you can just open their papers, they publish recommendation systems and archive even, and in a blog post, whatever is published, and familiarize yourself with how they design things. I think it makes sense. And when you studied for a number of companies like YouTube, Google, TripAdvisor, and so on, you start to see the patterns as well. And also what they write often, like Airbnb also wrote about their ML designs attempts, they write what worked, what did not work in industry, in real life. Unlike all those academic narrow papers, not always what you see in academic papers is really applicable to industry, or maybe they just move a metric by 0.001% with a lot of effort, and that's not what you're going to do. So having those blog posts from companies helped to identify patterns and answer questions a lot.
How did you approach systematizing all this information? Because to me, like, it sounds like a huge lot of different sources. And it's just like, how do you even manage the process and, learn from this in a way that you could talk about this at an interview? Like, did you take notes? Did you, I don't know, use some special approach, or how did you do this?
Yeah, I'm an old school, so I keep things like that all the time. I write, that's about birds. That's when I was studying about birds. So I make
old school listen to this without video.
It's old school. You go through courses and you write the notes and then you summarize them. And I have like that on ML design, on system design course, and I have 3 of those on lead code. Because on
Okay.
LeetCode, I realized that it works better when you write by hand. So whatever I have a challenging task that I can't solve and understand easily, and after I understood it, I still want to engrave it in my memory, I just take a pen and write it down, like literally write it down, because that's how I remember things. It helps me. So that's how it was a lot of systematic knowledge. But for ML design, it just took maybe a week. And for system design, it took me like 5 days to prepare. And for LeetCode, it was like almost 2 months. So, but for some other people can be different. So for system design, I just followed some advice on the internet, and I bought Grokin system design course. It was quite cheap, like I think $50 or something. So I bought it and I studied it, and that was enough to pass the interview. Although if you want in-depth understanding, people advise reading data-intensive applications book, which I also read parts of it. But for interview, actually having that course and 20 mock interviews mock interviews are important, very important. That will be enough to pass the interview, but it does not make you a great system designer. Of course, you need to have some hands-on practice after
you pass the interview and start working at the company, I guess, right?
Yes, so you understand the basics. So people who are doing ML design need to understand system design, because you are designing ML systems at scale. But if you're hired for ML part, I'd say it's more important than your experience with load balancers and things like that, because there is always infrastructure team and big companies who take care of that. But you need to understand on high level how it works, more or less. But if you don't know all the load balancing techniques after some time, maybe it's not crucial, It depends on your role.
Well, 1 week to prepare for system design is pretty impressive, given that I don't know, I don't know much about your prior background because before that, but I guess like terms like load balancer didn't mean much to you before you started reading these things. So like, and processing all that in 1 week is impressive. So you probably have very good memory.
Yeah, I have a good memory. Plus, I had the most what works to me is deadlines. I just put that interviews with Facebook, because why not to try? And then for ML part, I already tried and failed in Lyft, and I passed in Shutterstock, and I had some offers. So ML part was pretty much trained, and system design was specifically for Facebook, because in other companies, they did not ask it. They did not ask system design at LinkedIn, for example. And on Facebook, they ask system design. And I did not have a chance to prepare for that before, but I already put an interview, so I had a deadline. So I just did all that course in 5 days and put a few mock interviews with people who worked in Facebook. And so the great help was that I could practice mock interview with a person who worked in Facebook, and he knew what is expected on system design. But I passed not because of that. I passed because the role was more about an intersection of machine learning and optics. And we did not dive that much into system design, but we were discussing things like 3D reconstruction and epipolar axis and optics. And that's my field. So I a bit got lucky as well with the topic, but that's how they selected my resume out of all possible resumes. I think they needed somebody with expertise in optics, and that helped.
Yeah. And from what I heard from you, having a network is really helpful. If you know somebody or can get to know somebody from Meta or from the company where you have an interview, and just ask them, hey, can you have a mock interview with me, please? And then they're just, okay, how about yes? And that's how you prepare, right? Because I understand that just taking a course is not enough, right?
No, not enough. It's hard to put it all in your head properly, and during mock interviews, you learn more. There are other cases, like, yes, it's nice if you have mentors and people who are willing to help you, but ideally, I try to have it like mutual, that I give value to person and he gives value to me. So what can you do if other people are much more experienced than you? You cannot provide them mock interviews, but there were also mock interviews when we did it mutually. So I interviewed the guy and he interviews me, and we both prepare for the same level of position. So there were a couple of interviews like that. And yes, lucky enough, I had mentors who were willing just to help me, but I will just, for instance, send them a painting as a thank you. So I like to give something in return, but not always you can give the same level because they are more advanced. Well, then you can gift a painting, for example.
Well, sometimes people are just fine with helping without expecting anything in return, because who knows, maybe in 10 years you will be their manager or something. Like, this karma thing that you mentioned. You help somebody and then after some time they refer you and you get a job.
Yeah, I think it's also a good strategy. Like I always try to help other people. So people whom I mentor, I am more advanced than them, and there are people who mentor me, but across the globe, all this getting help and providing help. I like to keep it in balance, even more on helping side. Also, it makes you happier, I think, if you help somebody and you see the progress.
It does, yeah. So I see that there are some questions. So a question from Hari. As a staff AI engineer, how much of your time do you deal with data engineers, data scientists, with building ETLs, building pipelines, and doing all this MLOps stuff?
Yes, so again, it depends on the projects. In some projects, you have a lot of collaboration with data scientists. So because you require some initial analysis, I think in some projects, you collaborate more with products. In some projects, you have to collaborate quite a lot with legal. So it's kind of project-based. So, but as I said, like all those collaborations, like it's around half of the time. And then the other part of the time is designs and reviewing and preparing the docs and things like that. So ETL pipelines, I do implement some because I like to stay hands-on, but most of the time they're implemented for you by people who you mentor. So you just decide what has to be done and they implement it and you review the code.
Mm. And you said that you do quite a lot of code reviewing, right?
A lot, yeah. Quite a lot of code reviewing, yeah.
How do, like for me, doing code review is difficult because if I'm working with multiple projects at the same time, every time I review a piece of code, I need to get back into the context of that specific project and understand why this code is written in exactly this way. And this is very difficult, like especially if it's like 3-4 projects at the same time. How do you do this?
Yeah, I could have like 5 projects at the same time, but I quite well remember each contact because you jump between meetings of literally like now you're discussing this project, the next project, 25 minutes, you just jump between meetings and you're already like switching context. I think it just trains you to be always in context, or maybe just my thing that I'm quite easy to switch and I remember what's going on in like 5 different projects. No
Did you do anything special to get this skill, or it was just always like that for you?
It was always like that for me.
You're lucky.
I mean,
I guess.
context switching was easy for me. Yeah, always. So.
Okay. Yeah, because I was going to ask you for advice on how to approach that, but I guess
this is just a gift. Maybe I don't know. It just it's easy for me to switch between like from meeting to meeting, completely change of context, different projects that we discuss. Okay, hard to advise what to do about it.
Well, maybe I guess what worked for me at the end, I think, is somehow arrange things in a way that don't require context switch, like sequentially, and then maybe have these blocks. But yeah, it's not easy, at least for me. So another question that I think we have in the list and I didn't ask you is somebody, let's say, wants to follow your path and go from academia to industry. and also get on a staff level. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, don't be shy to go to the tech lead role or lead role. If you were leading in academia, you have most of the challenging, transferable soft skills. It's much harder to learn than learn in programming or, Git and other tools. Prepare some pet projects that are in line, but also look at your own career as a whole and the parts where you were leading things, initializing things, mentoring, teaching, up-leveling team, all that is quite transferable and important. If you're able to understand the requirements of the future role of a lead or tech lead, get them and see how this aligns with your previous experience. Prepare well for cultural interview, because a behavioral interview, it's exactly when you show yourself at the right level, most of it. You do that during all interviews, but the cultural and behavioral interview, it's the main show of your leadership skills, your ownership, and prepare for that well. You may also want to practice that with somebody who already is in industry on a high level role. If you happen to have such mentor like a director, I didn't, so I didn't prepare, but if I could, I would use that chance and get the feedback. Some people get even coaching and consulting on that. Obviously, prepare for the others' interviews also well, because even if you're a great leader and so on, if you failed lead coding, as we know, you will not get a job. So you have to be ready for the other things too, and give yourself time. It's okay if you're gonna fail for some time. It took me a year between when I started interviewing and I could not pass, down to the point when I had all interviews, all offers. So I had like 5 interviews in process and like 5 offers, 100%. So from 0% to 100%, it took me 1 year and a lot of failures. Be ready for that. If you don't fail and you don't try, you will not get it. Like kids who learn something, they always fail it from the first time usually.
And learn to live with failure, right? It's not about you personally.
No, it's not about you. I even don't consider it as a failure. For me, failure is like, something where you really lose in, like mountaineering is dangerous. But interviews, if you failed, you're exactly where you were. So it's not really a failure. It's more like a try with no risk.
Yeah.
You have nothing to lose. Yes, you have nothing to lose, really. So yeah.
Yeah, you're saying this like 3rd, 4th time?
Yes,
Indeed,
but
because it's the case, right?
Because it is the case, yes. So when people don't want to try because they're afraid, I completely don't understand. Yes, so it is the case. Yeah.
Okay. And question from Charlie is, what is the most exciting thing about working as an AI engineer or AI staff engineer?
Oh yes, this is very interesting field. Look what happens now with all this ChatGPT and diffusion models and so on. So you're at the age of technology. You're actually like one of the first people who are making the future and moving into the future. So that's very exciting. You can actually try lots of different technologies, and you have a freedom of what you want to try, because you can also lead some R&D projects, for example. And this I find very exciting, that you have to learn in this fast changing field when the future is really coming. Every few months, you have some new revolutions, some changes. That's very interesting and that's very cool. And mastering this and understanding how it all works, it's very interesting. So the other part is, if you like, I really like, and I was craving for that in science, is to see quite a big and fast turnover between your work and some impact metrics of revenue and so on in the company you work. So when you actually push things into production and you see how they influence and you see the impact, it's very pleasant. Not always it's the case in science. Sometimes you develop lots of things, you write papers, but you don't feel it's neat and you don't feel the impact. It takes time in science to get an impact.
Yeah, thanks. I know we're running out of time, but this one will be the last one and really quick. Are there any books or other learning resources that you can recommend to the listeners?
Yeah, there are lots of books depending on what you want. But I think that
Let's take like one or two.
I like communication for communication. I think it's important to learn how to communicate. It's crucial conversations and never split the difference. I'd say that will be the best too. If you want to understand about staff role, the staff engineering path is the best book on that one, I'd say. Then I like books in general about leadership and ownership and stuff. There is a book, Extreme Ownership. And for career, it's highly advised to read the book Rise by Tatiana.
Yeah,
so
thanks.
Career-oriented books, yeah.
Thank you. So, always pleasure having you here. We should maybe in 2 years again have a chat and see what changed. So yeah, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for sharing your knowledge, your experience getting this staff AI engineering role, sharing with us what you do. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining us today too. And everyone have a great weekend.